Apple CEO had come. He had inaugurated the first official Apple store. A lot of excitement about the new investments which are coming into India. And there was a lot of talk of the trajectory in which India is moving and the negative trajectory in which Pakistan is moving. There are new conversations which are starting to take place in China, which are actually questioning the utility of Pakistan as an ally. Pakistan is a dead economy. Pakistan is likely to be caught in a kind of a pincer between the new strategic contestation which is emerging between China, which is Pakistan's new sugar daddy, and the US, which was Pakistan's old sugar daddy. Just a couple of days ago, a Chinese manager who was managing transport in a dam, a mega dam which is being built in a part of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, which is called Gilgit-Baltistan. There was suddenly a riot in that area. This is the Dasu Dam. There was a riot in that area, and the Chinese man was accused of blasphemy. The details are somewhat sketchy right now, but apparently it turns out that he had asked some people or he had questioned some people about taking time off for prayers, much more than what was allowed to them. And one of those people levied a charge of blasphemy against him, and there was an uproar. Riots started taking place. There was a mob which surrounded a Chinese encampment, and the situation became very tense. Now this gentleman, the Chinese guy, was airlifted out of that place and taken to another place where he was shown as being arrested, although he is supposed to be in a relatively secure place which has been declared a sub-jail. Now the thing is that while I don't think anything much is going to come out of this case, because for the Pakistanis it's a very delicate balancing act between all their obsession for Islam and the indoctrination which has happened in Pakistan on the issue of blasphemy. And of course their deep dependence on China. After this particular incident happened, there were a lot of people in the social media space in Pakistan who were actually juxtaposing what had happened in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir with what was happening in Mumbai on that same day. In Mumbai, the Apple CEO had come. He had inaugurated the first official Apple store, and there was a lot of partying going on, a lot of excitement about the new investments which are coming into India. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, virtually their only friend left in the world. Actually, this is a relationship made for each other in some ways, because China doesn't have many friends, neither does Pakistan. But Pakistan has this unique habit of even alienating the few friends it has, and there was a lot of talk of the trajectory in which India is moving and the negative trajectory in which Pakistan is moving. So these comparisons with India were inevitable. I don't think the Chinese are going to look very happily at this particular incident, because I think it conveys all that is wrong in the China-Pakistan relationship, the deep disconnect between the China-Pakistan relationship. For all the talk of all-weather friendship, stronger than steel and sweeter than honey, iron brothers, the two countries call themselves, the fact of the matter remains that culturally and civilizationally, China and Pakistan are like chalk and cheese. In fact, If anything, China has more in common with India, both culturally and civilizationally, than it has with Pakistan. But that's another story. The thing is that this particular incident is emblematic of not just about the civilizational and cultural divide between China and Pakistan, but I think more importantly, it is emblematic of many other things which are going wrong in that particular relationship. I think what is important is, from a Chinese point of view, this latest attack, if you will, is just the latest in the series of attacks on Chinese. Chinese diplomats have been attacked, Chinese engineers have been attacked, Chinese workers and businessmen have been attacked. So it's, in a sense, there's a lot of angst and anger against the Chinese, especially in places like Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, but even in Karachi, where some of these people have been attacked. Now, the Chinese have been pumping in a lot of money in Pakistan, and one of the things which the Chinese have been insisting on from their counterparts in Pakistan is that security has to be assured. The Pakistanis have continued to promise them the world as far as security is concerned, but haven't really managed to deliver on security pledges which they have given to the Chinese. And pretty routinely there are attacks which are taking place on the Chinese. And it's not just the Islamists in Pakistan who are responsible for it, but the cultural disconnect which I was speaking about also puts the onus on many of the Chinese, who tend to treat people of other ethnic backgrounds and other nationalities virtually as slaves, simply because they have the money, they are calling the shots. They treat everybody else very shabbily, and somewhere there is also a reaction against the heavy-handedness of the Chinese, the Chinese managers. But nevertheless, the Pakistanis have apparently raised two divisions, strong, a cadre to protect the Chinese who are working on the so-called CPEC projects in Pakistan. And a lot of care is being taken to ensure that nothing untoward happens to the Chinese. Of course, this latest incident of blasphemy is not going to go down well as far as the Chinese are concerned. The real problem going forward is going to be that the Chinese are going to insist even more on bringing their own security for their people who are working in projects or on projects in Pakistan. The Pakistanis have been balking at this particular demand of the Chinese and haven't as yet given in. But how long will the Pakistanis be able to resist? After all, if you look at the equation between China and Pakistan, it's rather imbalanced. I say that because today China is the biggest creditor of Pakistan. Almost 30 to 35% of Pakistan's total debt is owed to China. Literally, China holds the purse strings of Pakistan in its hands. Not only is it the largest creditor, China is also the biggest weapon supplier to Pakistan. In a sense, it's the biggest security provider to Pakistan, because Pakistan simply does not have the money to buy arms from the Western countries. Apart from weapons and money which the Chinese have been giving, the Chinese are the biggest investors in Pakistan. They are also Pakistan's biggest trading partners, although that trade once again is heavily skewed in China's favor. Even the free trade agreement that the Pakistanis have signed with the Chinese has gone against Pakistan, virtually wiped out the indigenous industry in Pakistan. And finally, China is extremely critical to Pakistan because it's its biggest diplomatic backer. So every time a Pakistani has to be labeled as a terrorist in the UN Security Council, who jumps in to protect the Pakistanis and bat for terrorists? It's the Chinese. So the Chinese have in some sense become the biggest defenders of global terrorists, and this is despite the fact that the Chinese suffer from terrorism of their own from some of these very same groups which target India, although under different labels. The bigger problem for the Pakistanis is going to be how do they resist a Chinese pressure going forward. Now this is important because like I said, China is one of the biggest, probably the biggest, by far the biggest investor in Pakistan. And of course, the big ticket item of that investment is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which the Chinese touted as the flagship project of the BRI, the ambitious BRI project. Now, the dream behind CPEC was that the Pakistanis thought that this is going to be a game changer, this will change Pakistan's destiny, that this will put Pakistan at the crossroads of the world, it will put it at the center of global business, Pakistan will be the most hip and happening country in the world. But almost 10 years later, because CPEC started sometime in 2013, almost 10 years later, that promise has been belied. That promise is going nowhere. Some of it is because of the Chinese, some of it is because of the Pakistanis, and a lot of it is because of the kind of predatory and very sharp business practices that the Chinese follow. Now, so the CPEC has really not gone anywhere. The Chinese have so far sunk in about $25–26 billion, but this has not been a game changer. In fact, if it has been a game changer, it has not been in the way that it was originally envisaged to be a game changer. It has been a game changer not by making Pakistan a happening country, but by actually ruining the Pakistani economy. The Pakistanis, of course, will deny it, because how do you say the truth about your largest creditor? So the Pakistanis will keep swallowing whatever the Chinese dish out to them, and this kind of works for the Chinese. But the fact is that the CPEC has turned out to be a duff project. Now, when the CPEC was first unveiled, there were many Chinese analysts who had predicted that this will be a failure. One report, in fact, said that there are Chinese who expect to lose 80% of the money that they were going to invest in Pakistan, 80%. And that seems to be happening. Now, at that point of time, and many people in India continue to parrot that same old line that CPEC is going to address China's Malacca dilemma. That means that the sea lanes which connect China to West Asia, to the Middle East, which go through those narrow straits in the South China Sea or around the South China Sea, Indian Ocean, and which are going to be a choke point in the event of a conflict, that the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor will be able to avoid all of that. Now, anybody who says that has neither studied transport economics nor studied a map, and certainly knows absolutely nothing about modern economics. Because the fact of the matter is that the Malacca dilemma of China will continue to remain in place even if the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor was to be everything that it was supposed to be. But the fact is that there is no pipeline running through this China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. There is no railway line running through it. There is a road network coming in, but it's going over mountains which are very weak. So it certainly does not replace that big dilemma which is called the Malacca dilemma that the Chinese face. And yet this myth making has continued. Increasingly, what we are hearing now, and there are some colleagues of mine who've studied this particular issue and have been talking about it, that there are new conversations which are starting to take place in China, which are actually questioning the utility of Pakistan as an ally. They are saying that we need to do a cost-benefit analysis, whether Pakistan even serves the purpose for which we were allying with Pakistan. This does not mean that there is an imminent strategic shift which is going to be coming in, far from it, but it certainly means that the kind of economic utility that was being attached to Pakistan is now history. And Pakistan really does not have an economic dimension which will actually cement this relationship between the two quote unquote iron brothers. So I think what is likely to happen is that there will be a cooling off as far as the economic relationship between China and Pakistan is concerned. The strategic relationship will perhaps drag on for somewhat longer, and it will depend on a lot of other factors as well. But I think the economic relationship is more or less finished. That does not mean it's entirely finished, but it means that the kind of robustness which one expected when the CPEC project was unveiled, that story is over. And I think we see the first signs of this cooling off of the economic relationship emerging. They are manifesting themselves in many different ways. For example, the Chinese are, the Chinese investments under the CPEC projects have slowed down. The Chinese are no longer as open to give the Pakistanis money to bail them out as they were perhaps a couple of years back. In fact, during this latest crisis, economic crisis that Pakistan is facing, what the Chinese have done is that they haven't given any new money. It's much of the old money which the Chinese had been pumping into Pakistan. They've rolled over some of their old debts, but they haven't really given the Pakistanis any new money. And every time the Pakistanis have gone with a begging bowl, the Chinese, very much like the Saudis and others, have been telling the Pakistanis to clean up their act, get their house in order, but the money has been scarce. They probably not let Pakistan go down the tube, but nevertheless, I don't think they're ready to give them the kind of blank checks that they were giving earlier. So that is something which has started manifesting itself. From the Pakistani side also, I think some kind of a rethink has also happened of how deep they are in the hawk to the Chinese. And they would want to kind of balance out their dependence on the Chinese. But I don't think they're going to be able to do that because there is no money coming from anywhere else. Pakistan is a dead economy and nobody is going to sing good money or throw good money after bad as far as Pakistan is concerned. So the choice before the Pakistanis are rather limited. The strategic compact or the strategic glue which kept China and Pakistan together was of course India. I think that glue might not be as strong as it was in the past, but it's still there. And it's keeping these two guys together. And for India, that becomes a bit of a difficult situation because as some of the Indian military commanders have said, it raises the spectre of a two-front war. It raises the spectre of India being caught in a kind of a pincer between China and Pakistan, and something which any military strategist would ideally like to avoid. But thankfully, the Pakistanis are doing a fairly good job of doing that for us. So that is one. The second is, of course, there is an Islamist threat which the Chinese face from Pakistan and would like to remain engaged in Pakistan. The Pakistanis have often played a double game even with the Chinese. They have allowed Chinese jihadists to flourish in Pakistan, but have also cracked down on them. But this is a factor which will continue to remain in the China-Pakistan relationship. The Pakistanis will keep trying to show that they are cracking down on these guys. But if I understand the Pakistanis even a little bit, then I also know this, that the Pakistanis will keep that as a potential leverage against the Chinese. So that game will continue between China and Pakistan. But I think what is important is that international jihadist groups increasingly have the Chinese in their crosshairs. Now, the kind of pincer which the Chinese and the Pakistanis wanted to catch India in has kind of again turned around. It's kind of boomeranged on Pakistan. And in a sense, now Pakistan is likely to be caught in a kind of a pincer between the new strategic contestation which is emerging between China, which is Pakistan's new sugar daddy, and the US, which was Pakistan's old sugar daddy. China is, of course, the new America as far as Pakistan is concerned, but the Americans continue to have a lot of financial and economic influence in Pakistan even now. Now, the dilemma for Pakistan is that it needs the Chinese for all those things which I had recounted earlier, but it cannot shake off the influence of the United States and the kind of power that the US brings to bear in its dealings with Pakistan. So Pakistan is caught between these two giants which are actually fighting each other. For a brief period, Pakistan thought that it could continue to play, or it could play the role which it played in the past, in the late 60s, early 70s, of acting as a go-between between China and Pakistan. But I think that that was a different era. The Chinese and the Americans don't need Pakistan to act as a kind of an intermediary between them. So that option for Pakistan is also closing down. And the new strategic scenario which is unfolding is likely to be a lot more complicated for Pakistan than what it was in the past. And I say this because maneuvering through this minefield, given Pakistan's problems with both the US and China, was always going to be difficult. But the degree of difficulty rises immeasurably because of Pakistan's own internal crisis, the security, economic, political and institutional crisis which is tearing Pakistan apart.